Americans for Prosperity North Dakota proudly supported important policy improvements that broke barriers for all North Dakotans this legislative session. From tackling unnecessary and burdensome occupational licensing standards to fighting for tax relief, AFP is proud to have played a part in improving the lives of North Dakotans this year. Join AFP today by visiting www.afpnd.org. This advertisement was paid for by Americans for Prosperity. Welcome to the Plain Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Port. A little bit later in the show, I'm going to be speaking with Dawson Schefter from the North Dakota Republican Party. I've been a little critical of the Republican Party of late, and he responds to some of my criticisms. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about a complicated legal matter involving the question of royalty rights to minerals under Lake Sakakawea. And it's actually a couple of lawsuits, including one lawsuit filed by the owners of those minerals and another lawsuit filed by a group of plaintiffs, including a state lawmaker. Now, Lake Sakakawea is a man-made lake, as I'm sure most of you probably know. It was created when the Missouri River was dammed by the Garrison Dam, and of course that water that was blocked and it flooded, it inundated a lot of land that was owned privately by other people, including a lot of tribal land. Kind of a sad story there, but anyway, it inundated a number of a lot of property. The thing, though, is that when the government came through and condemned most of that land, they compensated the landowners for the surface rights. They did not compensate them for the mineral rights. Now, in the state of North Dakota, those are two different things. You can own the rights to the minerals under a piece of land without necessarily owning the rights to the surface, like what's on top of the land. It's kind of an unusual situation, but that's how it is. And when the federal government compensated, they bought surface rights. They did not buy mineral rights. And that wasn't really a big deal one way or the other for a long time because there was no real way to get at those minerals under the lake, except along came horizontal drilling, which was part of what made the Bakken oil boom possible here in North Dakota. That horizontal drilling made those minerals under the lake accessible, and now there's a question of who gets the royalties for those minerals. Now, the state of North Dakota claims it's theirs, and the reason why is because under rivers and under lakes naturally occurring, the government owns the mineral rights. Now, the thing, though, is that Lake Sakakawea, again, is man-made, which means that it's not naturally occurring. There were at one time private owners to the land under Lake Sakakawea, including the mineral rights, and those owners were never compensated by the government. When the government made a taking, it took that land, right? The government condemned the land. There was that whole process, right? The, what do they call it? It's condemnation. I'm forgetting there's another term for it, and now I'm forgetting it completely, but it's where the government comes along and it essentially expropriates the land, and the law requires fair compensation to the landowners. Those landowners were never compensated. The state of North Dakota tried arguing in court that the banks of the Missouri River weren't constrained to the historical channel as it existed prior to the Garrison Dam being built and Lake Sakakawea being created. They're saying that now the high water mark is essentially up to the shores of the lake. It's all super complicated, but it went to court, and the state Supreme Court ruled, said, oh no, the private royalty mineral rights owners, they own that land under there. And so as a result of legislation passed by the legislature and the state's court's ruling, the Board of University and School Lands was set to pay out some $180 million in retroactive royalty payments to those mineral rights owners. But along comes a group of plaintiffs, including State Representative Marvin Nelson, who's a Democrat from Rolla, including Paul Sorum, who's been a fringe candidate for governor in the past, including Michael Coachman, similarly a fringe candidate for Secretary of State in the last cycle, as well as Charles Tuttle, who's kind of a statewide Gadfly, I think, is the best thing. He works in a lot of those collecting petition signatures and things like that, as well as Lisa Omlid, who's another sort of left-wing activist. They came together. They sued the state of North Dakota, and they actually won on part of their lawsuit. They argued that the state of North Dakota couldn't make a $189 million payout to the royalty owners because it would violate the state's gifts clause. Now, the state constitution has a clause in it which says that the state can't just write checks to people. Generally, I think this is an area of good policy, but somehow our courts have taken to interpreting it as meaning that the government can dole out public funds to private people and private businesses when it comes for the purposes of economic development, but somehow we can't dole out those funds to pay back royalties that were withheld from royalty owners over the years. And as a matter of fact, this same clause in the state constitution came up when the state auditor made a finding on the North Dakota Indian Affairs Commission because they bought, I think it was like $1,000 or so worth of gift cards for students at a leadership academy. And, the auditor basically said, hey, our state constitution says you can't just buy things and give them to people. The state government can't do that. So it was a legitimate finding. And I guess the Indian Affairs Commission isn't going to do that anymore, but yet somehow we can't. I'm not sure how we get to interpreting royalty owners that are due these landowners, how we're interpreting that as a gift. It doesn't make any sense to me. But what's interesting about all of this, and this is my point, is that Representative Nelson and his other plaintiffs are asking, after having partially won their lawsuit, are asking some $62,271,000 in attorney's fees. They also want another $750,000 to the plaintiffs who, quote, risked their time, talent, and treasure for this clause as a filing in support of the motion. What's interesting is if you actually read the affidavits in front of this, and I'm looking right now at State Representative Nelson's affidavit, some of the things they complain about is being attacked in the media, including being attacked by me. Let me quote from Representative Nelson's affidavit. I quote, as expected, I was attacked in the media for being a plaintiff in this case. Plaintiffs were disparaged in the Crude Life Network, Say Anything blog, Williston Herald, Bismarck Tribune, and Minot Daily News. We were called thieves. We were accused of using, quote, dark money to hurt North Dakota. We also had to explain our case to numerous people questioning our motives and character. We were also accused of using the lawsuit to merely harass mineral owners with pending lawsuits. Representative Nelson continues in his affidavit. I experienced additional hardship as a result of volunteering to be a plaintiff in this case and to protect state assets from unconstitutional dispensation. I received phone calls attacking and insulting me. One caller from Oklahoma even said she prayed we would lose the case. Numerous people confronted and disparaged me in public. In short, I became persona non grata and am no longer invited to certain group meetings and events. His affidavit continues. I also experienced hardship as a North Dakota House representative. Representative Porter blocked me from serving on the Natural Resources House Committee, a committee chosen for me by my caucus. No other House representative was blocked from their chosen committees. Representative Mary Johnson also improperly questioned me about the lawsuit on the House floor during debate on an unrelated bill. So essentially, Representative Nelson is whining. Somehow he's a politician. He's put himself in the public limelight. He's not a private citizen. And he's complaining because people are criticizing him because they think his lawsuit is stupid. And it was stupid. I mean, what a hero. This group of plaintiffs went out and stopped the state of North Dakota on a rather tortured interpretation of the state constitution from paying out past due royalty payments to royalty owners. I mean, people who were denied those payments inappropriately. Remember, again, they own those mineral rights, or at least they're the descendants of the people who owned those mineral rights from when Lake Sakakawea was created. The government never compensated from that. The use of those minerals were essentially denied them up until now. And then the state of North Dakota collected the royalties on it. They should be paid back. But now, whether or not they're going to be paid back has been complicated by this lawsuit filed by Representative Nelson and 4 others. And now not only did they file the lawsuit, they want a big payday, $150,000 each on top of, $62 million plus for their lawyers to pay for it. Remember when Barack Obama, he had a book, what was it called? The Audacity of Hope? There's some real audacity going on here, I'll tell you that much. Now, what's happened here is this is essentially a filing with the court. The plaintiffs' lawyers have moved that they be compensated for their legal fees, have moved that the plaintiffs themselves be compensated for being such a bunch of heroes. So we don't know what's actually going to happen with this yet, whether or not the court will rule on it. They'll probably, frankly, because they did win part of their lawsuit, they'll probably get something. I don't think it's going to be $62 million plus. I don't think it's going to be $750,000 split up among the 5 plaintiffs, but it's going to be something. Meanwhile, the people who own the mineral rights under Lake Sakakawea, for the most part, still haven't been paid. And that's a shame. More to come straight ahead, right after this message from our sponsors. This episode of the Plain Talk Podcast is brought to you by Energy of North Dakota. Oil and natural gas from North Dakota strengthens all of America. And through our abundance of talents, innovations, and technologies, energy responsibly produced here translates to worldwide economic stability. With producers and our communities working together, we're securing a sustainable future that generation after generation can build on. It's all happening right now with Energy of North Dakota. Learn more at energyofnorthdakota.com. Dawson Schefter joins me. He is Chief of Staff to Chairman Rick Berg from the North Dakota Republican Party. And I've been a little critical of Republicans lately. I've written a couple of things, and I got a response from the North Dakota Republican Party on Twitter disagreeing with me. Essentially what I've been arguing is that my point is that I think Republicans have reached a point where they have been so fantastically successful getting elected over and over again that in some ways they may have a growing blind spot here. Now, I will admit that the data for the case that I'm trying to make is a little anemic because Republicans keep winning elections. The 2018 election cycle was no different. Republicans held every single statewide elected office. There was really no change in the makeup of the legislature. I mean, at this point, it's hard to imagine Democrats losing more ground. They lost, a lot of ground in 2016. In 2018, I think, what did they end up gaining? Like a seat, Dawson, something like that? I mean, there wasn't much change at all in the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm talking about hasn't shown up at the ballot box yet. But what worries me is that it will at some point. And I guess what I'm looking at, for instance, is Measure 1 on the 2018 election cycle, where North Dakotans overwhelmingly voted for an ethics commission. I don't know that a lot of North Dakotans necessarily understood the specific ins and outs of Measure 1. I think if they did, they might not have voted for it. I don't think Measure 1 was very good policy, but they voted for it. And I think that was an expression that a lot of feeling that a lot of North Dakotans have, which is that our state government isn't very responsive and isn't very accountable. Now, at the end of this legislative session, we had an issue with the auditor, which I will admit has left me very disappointed in Republican leadership, although it's not strictly a partisan issue because I'm pretty sure every single Democrat in the legislature voted for the legislation as well, but basically it was taking power away from the state auditor. Well, Democrats may have voted for that. Like it or not, Republicans are the folks in charge. And if there's blowback at the polls, it's going to be Republicans who take the brunt of it. So that's my contention, is that Republicans have, they're governing and increasingly the electorate is not feeling listened to and they're not feeling respected. Now, Dawson, obviously you have a different point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, Rob, the Republican Party today and the North Dakota Republican Party, I would say we're doing more than ever before to listen to voters. We've got an active field team and a strong volunteer force. Their sole mission is to get out and to connect with and listen to as many North Dakota voters as possible. And in fact, as a state party, that's the number one item on our priority list. And so already this year in 2019, which would traditionally would be what folks call an off year, we've already spoken to thousands of North Dakotans, and we've heard from them, and we've listened to them. And when we hear from those voters, whether that's a poll, public or private, or that's at the ballot box, or it's at their door or over the phone, what we overwhelmingly hear is that they support the direction that Republican leadership is taking our state. I think that reflects in our financial numbers as well, and the strong financial position that the party's in. There again, thousands of North Dakotans at every giving level believe in good government, and they believe in that Republican leadership leads to that good government and limited and lives within its means. And so our mission is to continue providing that. And I think folks are supporting that with their dollars, with their vote. And so, and then electorally, I mean, you kind of laid that out before as well, but it's, we've never been stronger in the, on the whole, right? Executive offices, we've got a strong delegation in Washington, D.C., strong Republican leaders there, a great Republican governor. And so by all measures, our party has never been more organized and more ready to get out there and continue the hard work of campaigning to earn the support of North Dakotans. And, I think you point to a couple of issues this legislative session where, you've said there's some debate, and I think that's good, and that'll happen out in the open, those conversations that we had. But let's also not forget Republicans, the Republican governor in Doug Burgum, and our leaders in the legislature. They delivered a conservative, balanced budget. It makes strategic investments and it funds our public priorities. And most importantly, it keeps state government living within its means. And it did that without raising taxes. And substantial investments in education, in infrastructure, in behavioral health, diversifying the economy. And they delivered some property tax relief by covering the cost of county social services and absorbing that in an efficient way. And just a couple of things there that came out of the legislative session that were really positive. And so I think the headline of your article, Rob, was North Dakota Republicans are sort of relying on Democrats' incompetence. And what I would say is we're actually doing more than we ever have to make sure that we're listening to voters and being responsive to voters. And doing that hard work of making sure that we're talking to them and staying in touch with, what's their priority and what are they focused on, and trying to deliver those outcomes in the legislature as well. So
let me bring a couple of points I think which disputes that, because let's roll back the clock to 2016. We had a very contentious fight within the Republican Party between Attorney General Wayne Stenjum and our current Governor Doug Burgum for the party's gubernatorial nomination. Now, Doug ultimately won that competition on the June primary ballot and went on to coast to an easy victory in the general election. But one feature of his campaign was that he was going to stick it to the good old boys in Bismarck, right? I mean, we all heard that, the good old boys club in Bismarck. He complained about the legislature's handling of finances and everything else. He campaigned on that, and he won. And I got to tell you, as an observer of the election, I think that good old boys stuff resonated. You have, as I mentioned, the outcome of the Measure 1 election. I don't know that North Dakotans voting to create an ethics commission is an endorsement of how they're feeling about the status quo when it comes to accountability, when it comes to being listened to. Also, you have the auditor situation, which you just mentioned as well. Now, part of the problem for the argument that I'm making is the people who are being successful at articulating that are other Republicans. Governor Burgum, yes, campaigned against the good old boys club, but he did so as a Republican and won office as a Republican. The only people in the legislature to vote against the auditor legislation were other Republicans. So I realize that makes my argument a lot harder to make. But do you understand? I mean, because you're telling me, well, we're doing more than ever to listen to the people, but yet one of your own candidates, Doug Burgum, ran against the good old boys club. Why do you think that resonates with people if everything's hunky-dory and everybody's happy with Republican leadership?
Well, I think, this whole thing is a process, and government's a process, and political parties. I mean, the Republican Party, and I think a large part of the reason we've been so successful is because we've got a big tent with a lot of ideas and a lot of debate, and we have that out in the open, and we do that, during elections. And I think that's a net positive, Rob. I think those conversations that we have are a net positive, and I think, Governor Burgum's been a strong leader for the party, and we've continued to, sort of work with North Dakota's success and sort of North Dakota spirit of hard work and being successful. I mean, I think Republican leadership for years now has gotten government out of the way. North Dakota's economy has boomed because of that. It's allowed industry to innovate and be successful. We've got more jobs than we have people. I mean, we're working to close a workforce shortage. The energy industry leading the nation in innovation, the tech industry investing and growing in North Dakota to diversify things. I mean, I think those are huge positives. And meanwhile, Rob, North Dakota Democrats, what are they talking about? They're embracing a move toward radical socialist policies. I mean, the presidential election right now is like a race to the far, far left. And those policies, those socialist policies, they would bankrupt our state. They'd bankrupt our nation. They rip at the very fabric of what we're founded on and the work that we've done and the success that North Dakota's seen. I mean, just a handful of those ideas, right? I mean, you got government-controlled wages, government-controlled healthcare. That's been a disaster. Open borders, abolishing ICE, tearing down existing border walls, a Green New Deal. It sounds wonderful, right? But that would crush North Dakota's economy and our energy industry. Yeah. Rip away good, high-paying jobs from folks all over North Dakota, in oil country and out of oil country. And so I think, Rob, when we're up against ideas like these and, leaders in the left that are pushing ideas like that, the last thing that North Dakota Republicans can do is rest on Democrats' incompetence. That's the last thing we can do.
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure I agree, because you're right. I mean, all of those things you just said about Democrats are right. All of those things espoused by their national party and at times espoused locally by local candidates as well, and local Democratic Party leaders as well. I think that makes it very, very hard for Democrats to win elections in North Dakota. I think it makes it a lot easier to win elections in for Republicans. So I don't want to say that's the only variable, because elections are complex and there's a lot of reasons why people vote, but I mean, the Democrats are hamstringed. And what worries me, one thing I think that's remarkable about the success of the North Dakota Republican Party is that it's because it's been successful for so long. I mean, part of the reason why politics are cyclical in the United States is that, political parties, they get in power for a while and then people kind of get, they get fat and lazy and people get tired of them and they kick those people out and they elect new people. And that really hasn't happened in North Dakota. And I do think that in the past, that has been a testament to, a certain pragmatism. I don't think anybody, like you said, pragmatism, you say big tent. I think those two things go hand in hand. But also, Republicans, I think, have done a very, very good job of making people feel listened to. I'm just worried that that's starting to change. And part of the reason that's starting to change is how many Republicans have to worry about losing their next election. I mean, I don't know that there's, I realize that you as a party leader, you never want to come out and admit that, but I mean, I think that's reality. For a lot of Republicans across the state, they really don't have that much to worry about when it comes to electoral consequences. How do you make sure that's not turning into complacency? How do you make sure that that's not turning into, we're the good old boys club, we can do whatever we want and still get elected. Obviously Governor Burgum saw something. He campaigned against it. It resonated with voters. I think those feelings are out there. How do Republicans avoid it?
Well, this is a great conversation, Rob. I mean, I think the leadership and the vision for Governor Doug Burgum and Chairman Rick Berg is that this party continues to sort of build on its success and sort of continue to do the hard work that needs to be done. You say some Republicans maybe don't have anything to worry about. Well, I think that's the wrong approach. And at the state party level and our teams, I mean, we are, like I said, we're doing more than ever to go out and listen to voters and have those conversations. And so whether or not they think they have something to worry about, it doesn't really matter. We're going to continue to go out and do that hard work of listening to them and having those conversations and being responsive and engaging within the community. Like I said, we've got a wonderful team here at the state party that's continuing to work with all kinds of people that are willing to dedicate their time to volunteer, to make phone calls and knock on doors and read mail and send mail and do all the work that goes into making sure that you've got a responsive government and a responsive, elected leaders and a responsive political party. And so, that's the work that we're going to continue to do. And complacency, I look around our office that's busy every single day and people are working hard and we're talking to thousands of North Dakotans. And I don't see any complacency here. I see people that are working hard. I see elected leaders that are embracing this work and working hand in hand with the state party under the leadership of Governor Burgum and Chairman Berg. And so, that's what I see from the inside, Rob. That's what I see us doing. continually every day. And that story doesn't always get told because we don't need to talk about that, right? That's just the work that we do as an organization. And so, that's our focus. Like I said, our number one priority in this office, and I think you visit with anybody on our staff, they tell you it's listening to people and it's hearing from North Dakotans. That's what we focus on doing every single day.
Last question. I just want to talk about Measure 1 for a moment. Should Republicans have gotten out in front of that? Because we had a lot of debates about, should we create an ethics commission? Should we be doing more with transparency and campaign reporting and maybe regulating some political activities? I think Measure 1 was terrible public policy. I don't know. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think I've been pretty clear on this publicly. It's terrible, and we're stuck with it now. Should Republicans have gotten out ahead of that? I mean, I see that as emblematic of what I'm talking about, where Republicans had a little bit of a blind spot and the voters came in and said, we want something done about this. Should Republicans have gotten out ahead of that?
I would say we saw some campaign finance reform in previous legislative sessions, but, the public spoke, they voted on this measure, and then I think the legislature addressed it in an open way. They had great hearings. A lot of folks attended and gave testimony and weighed in. I think, this process will flesh out now and the Ethics Commission will get stood up. And I think, the voters spoke at the ballot box and then Republicans carried through on that this legislative session, and sort of fulfilled their obligation. And, I don't think there's any hard feelings there necessarily, Rob. I mean, I think, voters brought a measure and it's a part of this process and they have that ability. And I think that's a great thing. And it's a great thing that's a part of our state. And so, those debates that we had, the policy conversations take place. But I think the important thing is that we did it in an open way. There was lots of public testimony and debates on that. And I'm sure that'll continue as the policies get implemented too.
Dawson, thanks for your time.
You bet. Thanks, Rob.
That's it for today's Plain Talk podcast. Remember, new episodes of the show come out most weekday mornings. During the summer months, we're probably not going to have new episodes on Monday mornings, mostly because the news slows down a little bit during the summer. If there's stuff going on, we'll bring back the Monday episodes. But otherwise, mostly you'll be getting just some bonus audio from my weekly appearances on the Jay Thomas Show on WDAY AM 970 out of Fargo, which have already been a part of the feed. Those will still go up Monday, just no new episode of the podcast on Monday mornings. If you want to follow news from Say Anything Blog and all the different stuff I'm doing, follow me on social media. I'm easy to find. Rob Port, Say Anything Blog. Search for those on Facebook and Twitter. They each have accounts, and you can follow those and stay up to date with all the latest columns and blog posts and podcasts, all that fun stuff. If you are listening to this podcast on a platform that allows you to rate or review, if you would leave an honest rating and an honest review, I would appreciate it. And thank you so far to everybody who has. I think it was like a 4.6% rating, 4.6 stars out of 5 on iTunes for everybody who's rated so far. I really appreciate that. I'm not asking you to leave me high ratings, just leave an honest rating. Every new rating, every new review helps other people find the show, and, well, that's a big deal. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again.